All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this latest boot camp on strategies to building security programs. So we are entering week 3 of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and this is actually part 1 of a 3-part boot camp series in honor of Cybersecurity Awareness Month that I'm going to be delivering starting today, and then part 2 will be next week, and then part 3 will be finishing up that last week of August. But what we're doing today is we're focusing on just the strategies to building security programs. What are we looking at? What's the philosophy? How do we build them? What do we include in them? And then next week, we're going to get into pricing because you need to know what you're selling before you can figure out how to price it. So next week, we're going to be focusing on pricing and how do you go through pricing the couple of programs that we're going to be talking about today. And then we'll be wrapping it up with the final boot camp of the series around selling. How do I position this to my customers? How do I overcome some of the objections that they're likely going to have, especially when it comes around pricing? So this is, like I said, it's a 3-part series. So if you're hoping I was going to touch on pricing today or selling or objection handling, it's coming. We are just focusing on what goes into building security programs today. So if you've never attended any of my boot camps in the past, my name is Stefanie Hammond. I am the head nerd that's responsible for all things sales and marketing related. Been with Enable for a little while now. You can see my contact information there on the screen. I'm on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, we should be linked together. And then my email address is there as well. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get going. Everyone's on mute. That's just to maintain call quality. But if you have any questions, just get them into the question panel, and I will do my best to answer as many of them as I can. If for some reason I'm not able to answer your question live, I do commit to getting an answer back to you. It'll be likely either later on today or tomorrow, because it's a very busy day for me, because right after this I got office hours and then into an afternoon session of today's boot camp. So, but I do commit to getting an answer back to you if for some reason I'm not able to answer it live. This session is being recorded. Reason being is I made some updates, some changes since the last time it was delivered, and I think actually I didn't deliver it the last time. I think my colleague Joe did. So I am recording this, and I'll get it uploaded into the Enable You section of myself, so that if you wanted to go back and listen to a segment, or if you wanted to pass this along to someone else to listen to, there will be a fresh updated copy available there probably in about a week or so once the marketing team gets it all cleaned up and posted. So what are we going to be talking about today? As I mentioned, this is the start of a 3-part series I'm going to be delivering this month, focused on how do you build, price, market, and sell security programs. Because I think on a weekly basis, I do get the question, Stefanie, how should I be pricing my programs? And it is a very loaded question. And it's one that just doesn't have a simple, straightforward answer. But hopefully over the next 3 sessions, you will come to appreciate and understand when I say, can't really tell you that, because it really depends on what you're selling and who you're selling to. And so, with this kickoff session today, I think it's going to take about 90 minutes to go through. We're going to be talking about, first, getting an understanding of the evolution of the managed services program design process. I've been doing this for 20 years now. It's changed a lot in 20 years. So we're going to talk about the updated program philosophy around program structure. And this one actually, should have more of a security-centric focus to it than what it's had in the past, if it's been a little bit since you've looked at your programs. We're then going to talk about, how do you structure and deliver an enhanced suite of security services. So we're going to include a discussion around, what should you be including in your offering? How should it be all packaged up? And so to help you with this, we're going to be reviewing, I have a sample security services program framework or matrix that you can use. You can see it in the handout section. You can download it there. You can use it as is, or use it as a springboard to designing your own suite of security programs. And then we're going to start touching on how we need to start changing the conversation that we're currently having with our customers and prospects so that they are more risk-oriented and risk-focused But that's really what part 3, taking place the last week of October is going to be when I talk about how do you sell security. But all 3 of these boot camps are going to really focus on or touch a little bit on the selling aspect, but it's going to be in that final boot camp where it's going to be all selling and objection handling. So again, if you're hoping to hear something else today, when I ask for your feedback at the end, it's probably coming because you could probably appreciate this is a huge topic, and I didn't want to keep you here all for 6 hours. So that's why we broke it into 3 separate boot camps. All right, so let's start by kicking things off, reviewing the new program design structure, the philosophy, the methodology that MSPs should be adopting today. The market landscape, I think everyone can appreciate that it has changed quite dramatically. Over the past 15, 20 years, MSPs have evolved quite dramatically as well. MSPs have really gone from offering, basic, break fix engagements where the MSP goes on site to kind of fix something that is broken at the customer's site. Something on the network is broken out of the blue, and then they go on site, they fix it, and then they send an invoice afterwards for the time that they spent fixing it. So we've moved beyond that, and now we're offering that monthly prepaid, that managed services type of contract where we're promising uptime and reliability and performance stability of the networks. But now it's come time for MSPs to evolve again, and their program packages, the sales messaging needs to evolve again because we really need to start addressing kind of that new reality we find ourselves in of security threats and data breach concerns that are really plaguing businesses today. And so the message is no longer about providing uptime and avoiding downtime. That was kind of our mantra for probably 15 years. Those benefits are really a given now, but really what we need to do is MSPs need to kind of shift their messaging and start focusing on how to best protect and secure their customers and keep their network, their data, and their employees safe. And that's the new messaging now, because as an MSP, your customers, they already expect that you're doing this for them already. Security assessment, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, discussions, planning, enforcement, or lack thereof, it has really become the top reason why MSPs are either winning or losing clients. And so as a result, today's new approach to program development really demands that programs have to have an enhanced cybersecurity and compliance focus to them. And at the very least, MSPs really need to build and enforce what I call a minimum viable cybersecurity program, that they standardize all of their customers on. Back in the day, we used to talk about a la carte and reactive programs, where the MSP kind of allowed their customers to kind of pick and choose their own path to support and what services they wanted to buy. We gave the customers a lot of leeway in terms of how they wanted to engage with us. But that is no longer a safe business practice because it puts you and your customer at considerable risk. Now, what I'm talking about here isn't necessarily revolutionary. MSPs have always included a basic set of security services in their programs, but with the emergence of new threat actors, especially over the last, 5 years or so, new security technologies, they have to be introduced and incorporated into your programs to continue to keep businesses, along with their intellectual property, their digital assets, their personal financial information, all of that, we need to keep it as protected as possible. And so as a result, all customer conversations now should be leading with security, should be leading with compliance, should have this discussion around how to reduce risk, strategies around reducing risk, and should be aiming to really educate prospects and clients on the necessity of having to improve their overall security posture. And, if anybody's had a chance to read our 2024 Horizons report, Enable did it in conjunction with Canalys, a very prominent research firm here in North America. We surveyed, I think, 300, 400 different MSPs late last year, and it found that even 20 years later, 22%, so I kind of rounded up to a quarter. 1 in 4 MSPs are still citing new customer acquisition as their top business challenge that's still facing their MSP. But the challenge really isn't, how do I get more customers? The challenge really is, how can I make myself stand out? How can I differentiate my MSP so I can actually steal business from another MSP? Because you guys have done such a fantastic job over the last 20 years, really educating the market on the need to move away from break fix and into a recurring revenue managed services contract. So most businesses, unless they're a startup, they likely are already working with another MSP. So it's not about trying and finding a client that's never worked with an MSP before, but now what you need to do is, how do you make yourself stand out, and how do you make yourself seem more professional so that you can steal that business from another MSP? And the answer is through security and compliance. Now is the time for MSPs, if you haven't done it yet, to reposition, remarket themselves as cybersecurity experts, and use that as a way to differentiate their MSP from their competition. And we really want to provide you a way to do this by presenting you with a security framework that you can use to build a new new set of security programs that you can take to market that will set you up as that authority figure, as that expert, in the hopes of, kind of enticing businesses away from, whoever they're using today, and that they'll transfer and switch over to you because they recognize that you are doing something different. Because the top growth opportunity for MSPs, it's still in the cybersecurity space. It is a market trend that is not going away anytime soon. And those MSPs that are having the most success, they're generating it by offering services that serve to keep businesses, their intellectual property, and their employees safe and secure, because that's really that sales focus now, and that's the conversation that we need to be having with our customers and prospects. Your sales conversations really need to be focused on the human aspect and how your security programs will help mitigate the inherent risk that just having employees brings when it comes to an organization's abilities to successfully avoid falling victim to a cyber attack. And it's been shown in a lot of different reports. I've seen it as low as 25%. I've seen it as high as 87%. But employees are still the primary cause of a lot of cybersecurity breaches that we're hearing about today. And this is changing a little bit because now, and I'm going to show you a little bit later, attacks are happening now that don't even involve any human involvement. So we need to consider that opportunity or that threat actor as well. And I said I'll show you an example of that. But again, there was one report, the Verizon report from a couple of years ago, 2022, 82% of data breaches do involve a human element. And the number of different types of attacks against people, like your phishing attacks, your social engineering attacks, those are steadily increasing because threat actors are continuing to view humans as the most vulnerable point of exploitation. And they're a very effective way of getting into an organization's network. So employees are still going to continue to be targeted. And according to a 2022 Gartner report, by next year, lack of talent or human failure is going to be responsible for over 50% of significant cyber incidences. And so because of all of this, by 2025, insider risk is going to cause 50% of organizations to adopt some sort of formal program to manage it. And that's up, basically 10% from today. So still incredible amounts of opportunity as businesses recognize they can't do this on their own, and they might start doubting their MSP and wonder if their current MSP is able to handle this on their own as well. So again, great deal of opportunity here for security-centric, security-focused MSPs. Modern program design really does need to be focused on developing essentially an insider risk management program and putting the emphasis on people. And you'll see when we get to the pricing bootcamp next week, that when we talk about pricing, we price it on a per user basis because we want to put the emphasis on people. And we want to build a program structure that leverages employees by helping to convert them into a type of human firewall that will help strengthen the effectiveness of the security technology tools and the processes that you're going to be including in the program as well. Businesses are under a significant amount of pressure to incorporate technology into their organizations in order to help fuel their growth, improve their overall efficiency, their profitability. But a lot of times with the addition of these new pieces of technology, it generally comes with a fresh new set of vulnerabilities that have to be dealt with. Businesses are also dealing with increased pressure to continue to allow their employees to work remotely. I know there's trends in some markets where employees are asked to come back into the office, but I think they're still going to be continuing this hybrid work model for years to come. And so that is helping to kind of expand the attack surface, making it easier for the bad guys to infiltrate the organization's network. But with this increased pressure to become more digitized, wanting to accommodate employees' preferred work location requests, if an organization doesn't have the right security strategy in place, they could actually be taking on more risk than they should or they know how to handle. And so again, this has created a great opportunity for MSPs that are having those conversations, that are in that mindset, to develop security programs that focus on that human element, the organization's employees, and working to reduce that insider risk exposure to ensure that employees don't choose to act or even can act in a harmful or unsecure manner. Because again, we don't want to put speed or convenience ahead of safety and security. So MSPs need to put a plan in place to rejuvenate the security conversation with their customers. And I was in Austin a couple of weeks ago at our business transformation event that we called Business of Security. And this was a huge theme of many of the guest speakers and the MSPs that were in the room. MSPs have to be having that security and risk conversation with their customers. It still is a green space or a blue ocean. If anybody has, listened or participated in my Red Ocean, Blue Ocean bootcamp a couple of months ago, it is a blue ocean for MSPs to thrive in because customers do want to be having these kinds of conversations with their MSP. And our best-in-class MSPs, they've recognized this and they're leveraging security and compliance to build better programs, increase their margins, accelerate their growth of their business, because they've recognized that there is pretty big revenue opportunities to be had by revamping what they've been previously offering and making the transition to move forward with kind of this security first mindset when they are working with their customers. And so if you haven't done so yet, you need to be starting to have these conversations. And I say this pretty emphatically because if you're not, you have the potential of actually losing a client to a competitor who isn't afraid to having these types of, which could be very, very tough conversations. Your competitor will go in and speak to your customers in likely a very meaningful way. And it may cause your customer to question why their own MSP isn't having this type of conversation with them. And they may begin to doubt your abilities, even though you're fully qualified. But again, if you're not having the conversation, if you're not reaching out and regularly engaging with your customers, and somebody else all of a sudden is, they may see this stark difference between the way that they perceive that you run your MSP versus, how they're being presented, how a business is being run by another MSP. Or worst case scenario, the client becomes breached and they will likely leave you anyway because they're going to feel that you are responsible for causing that breach. My boot camp last week was focused on 3 lawsuits that are happening right now where clients were breached. They're blaming their MSP and they're taking their MSP into court. And so the boot camp that Lewis, our head security nerd, and myself presented was, how could these court cases been avoided? And we talked about kind of the 10 things, the 10 fundamental simple things that, had these 3 MSPs put in place, this whole ugly mess could have been avoided. And number 10 was regular engagement with your customers, making sure you're sitting down and having those QBRs, those quarterly business reviews, because you don't want to be blamed for your client having a breach. Because in their mind, again, if you're not having these conversations, their perception is that you are doing everything you can to protect them from a cyber attack, that you're doing everything you can to protect them from a data breach. So if they do happen to suffer an attack, they are going to think, again, if you're not talking to them, that you didn't do your job, or that you don't know what you're doing, and they are going to hold you responsible, and they likely are going to go, switch over to someone else. And so we want to be able to go out, speak to our customers, educate them on the need to take their investment in cybersecurity more seriously if you know that they are laxed in that and they're not making the investments that they need to. And MSPs need to not be afraid of the pushback, and feel empowered to really challenge some of the traditional thinking that is still out there today. And that really is going to be coming home in my last boot camp on how do you sell security, because you're going to have customers that are probably not going to agree with your approach, and you're going to have to make a decision of how you deal with that. And so we'll talk about that in our last week of October. So if you're not having the security conversation today with your customers, with your prospects, one of the questions I tend to get is, Steph, how do you even start? And I always say start by providing a bit of background on the state of the ever-changing threat landscape. I'm sure that your customer, your prospect wouldn't disagree with you when you tell them that security attacks, data breaches, they're getting to be more and more commonplace these days. Looking at all the organizations around the world that got hit with a cyber attack last year, you can see that these attacks spawned all across different industries, all across different verticals. They attacked businesses of all shapes and sizes. So really the moral of the story there is that no business or vertical is immune to falling victim to an attack, big or small. All businesses are exposed to risk of attack at some level. And so we can't be complacent thinking that it's never going to happen to them, or allow them to convince you that, no one's ever going to want my data. Who's ever going to want to attack me, right? 2023 Verizon Data Breach Investigations report say that cyber attack breaches are going to top $5 trillion by the end of this year. And looking at that breakdown a little bit further, there's nearly 20 ransomware attempts reported every second. 80% of social engineering attacks are phishing attacks, so they're really still going hard against the employees. And the average time between cyber attacks is only 39 seconds. And so, again, we need to talk to our customers, tell them how the threat landscape is going to continue to evolve. It's going to become even more challenging to navigate as threat actors continue adopting, technologies like, AI, ChatGPT, other generative AI technologies as they work to refine phishing attempts, carrying out highly convincing business email compromise attacks, and use it to help them quickly write malicious code. Email, it will remain as one of the most popular attack vectors for cyber criminals to target organizations when they are attempting to steal money and confidential data. And so that's just going to continue to underscore the impact the human element will continue to have on the overall success rate of these different types of cyber attacks. Humans, unfortunately, they're still the weak link when it comes to cybersecurity. Employees can make mistakes in judgment. They can behave intentionally or unintentionally in an unsecure manner, because at the end of the day, this is just all a business for hackers. They don't care who they go after. It isn't personal to them. And they're going to continue to make money off of vulnerable businesses. The threats are going to continue. So it is the responsibility of MSPs to highlight the areas where businesses and their employees are vulnerable. It's up to you guys to provide that guidance then on how to better protect their organizations from falling victim to an attack, because, you know, it's not about if a business is going to experience a breach now, but it is more about when they're going to get hit and experience that breach. And I think small and medium-sized businesses, they are looking for assistance on best practices regarding security protocols, especially when we're dealing with kind of this new virtual world. And MSPs, you guys are the ones that are the very, very best equipped to educate and manage this for your customers. So when we are designing our new breed of security programs, again, our thinking needs to expand beyond threat prevention and threat detection. You know, again, those are kind of givens now. It really needs to start addressing the new reality of how are we going to respond? What are we going to do when our clients do get attacked? That's kind of the mindset that we have to take program development and design from. You know, thinking about how are we going to handle that for our customers in the least painful and most efficient way possible, so that we can help them get their businesses and their employees back online and back working as quickly as possible. So we're going to want to include features, services in our program design structure that's going to address this, because it isn't just about threat prevention and detection anymore. You know, we need to also factor in recovery and response and return to operation objectives, RTO, you might have heard it called that. And we have to factor in a lot of those cyber resiliency elements as well. And so when we're looking at, you know, these new threat actors, beyond just ransomware, MSPs need to review their program offerings that they're currently selling and, you know, do an honest review. How well do your current programs stand today to being able to properly protect, mitigate, respond, remediate, you know, all these new risks that we're now seeing develop across the threat landscape in as short a time frame as possible, obviously taking budget into account, because at the end of the day, downtime does cost money. And so to aid in that assessment, it is helpful to rely on a security framework. You're seeing an example here of NIST, the NIST security framework. But really all the frameworks, they're a little bit different, but they pretty much all say the same thing. So wherever you happen to be in the world today, select the security framework that's for your area. North America, we're going to rely on NIST. But again, I think what we're going to be covering today can really be applied wherever you happen to live. But use that as a guide and use that as a reference to help identify security gaps in both your own programs that you're offering, as well as the set of services that your customers are currently enrolled in today. And so use that to redesign your offerings so that you're plugging gaps for both you and for them. And so again, I'll be showing momentarily showing an example of what these new programs would look like, and they align to, you know, the NIST cybersecurity framework here. Again, if you're not familiar with NIST, the NIST risk management framework is really just a set of operational procedural standards that organizations must follow to ensure the compliance of its data systems, and that these are really looked at as recommended best practices to managing an organization's overall cybersecurity related risk. So as an MSP, if you follow something like NIST or you know, whatever framework is in your area of the world, use that, promote the framework to your customers, educate your customers on that, use that as a differentiating feature, because then you can say that your security packages do align to the recommended cybersecurity framework set forth by security regulators. Because a lot of the programs that I still continue to see being offered in the market today don't do, I think, a good enough job of properly protecting customers from, you know, a lot of types of attacks, which in turn unwillingly causes exponential risk for your MSP. Weak customer security from your customer's perspective leads to weak MSP security. The two are very much tied together. You know, from a program design perspective, I get asked quite regularly questions like, well, how many programs should I have? Or does the bronze, silver, gold, you know, precious metals tier structure still work? And I've always said, I've said it for 20 years, you know, you don't want to create different levels of programs for the sake of creating different levels of programs. You really want to think about the philosophy around the program offerings and what you're looking to achieve with each different level. If you are going to have multiple levels, and we'll talk about that, you know, do you have one program or do you have multiple programs? But with our new kind of program design structure, we want our priority to be focusing on, you know, protecting users, mitigating that insider risk, you know, mitigating the human element that inherently brings, just having employees just brings to an organization when it comes to managing cyber threats. And I've been using the term security a lot, cybersecurity, a lot up until this point, but the conversations that MSPs really need to be having with their customers should be focused on risk. And that's risk identification, risk tolerance, risk mitigation, and risk ownership. Security tends to be binary. Are you secure or you're not secure? But that's not really the conversation that MSPs should be having with their customers and their prospects, because it isn't really about whether a business is secure or not. It's really about how much risk are they exposed to and how much ownership of that risk do they wish to manage themselves versus offloading and transferring it over to you as their MSP. And then as their MSP, are you willing to take on and accept that risk on behalf of your customers? And if you are, at what price? And so a lot of this business risk, it does come down to the end user, because again, we know that employees do still tend to be the cause of a lot of the reported breaches that we hear about today. You know, there is a lot of risk that happens between kind of this chair and that keyboard, sorry there. So really MSPs need to do whatever they can to really bubble wrap end users to help them avoid a breach from occurring. Because besides just the insider risk, there are other risk factors that need to be taken into account as well when we're trying to assess a company's kind of overall risk rating. Like we need to take a look at, you know, what industry are they in? Is that industry regulated or not? We need to look at their annual revenues and look at their employee size. We want to look at the amount and type of data that they're collecting. We want to look at the types of vendors and the partnerships that they have, because that's also going to factor into, you know, how risky is this organization, or what type of risk is this organization exposed to. And then that is the information that we're going to use to help determine, you know, well, what's the ideal cybersecurity solution that we should be putting in place to help mitigate that risk. And so we want to look at risk really based on a scale, you know, and momentarily I'll be taking you through a slide where we talk about low, medium, and high. And an organization's risk rating, it is going to depend on the customer's industry, their compliance requirements, their size, their revenues, the types of data that they're collecting, the types of partnerships that they're going to have. And some businesses, just because of the vertical or their size or their annual revenues, they are going to be exposed to higher levels of risk. And therefore, they are going to require a much more comprehensive type of security package. While you may have other businesses that may have lower levels of risk and may not need such an extensive package to start. So the key here is really understanding your customer, or, you know, if there's a new market you want to move into, so that you can understand their business, the industry, their compliance requirements, their business risk exposure, and then you use that knowledge to build out your security programs that can then be used to help mitigate and lower that risk exposure and that breach impact accordingly. But again, a lot of MSPs, they're not having this type of risk and security conversation because they fear the pushback. They fear the objections that they're going to get from their customers and having kind of their security recommendations rejected and then having to deal with all of that. But it is part of your job as their MSP. You know, you have a role to play in all of this. You know, given the environment today, it is important that you're having these difficult conversations, and a lot of them may be difficult if you're not really experienced in having these types of conversations, but that's not a reason to avoid them. It's not an excuse to avoid them. It is part of your due diligence. It's part of your role to educate your customers on how to help them avoid becoming a potential target for attack, especially if you know that there are deficiencies in their coverage. and that these changes need to be addressed in how you protect them. There is, if anybody knows Charles Weaver, founder of MSP Alliance, I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of weeks ago in Austin, but he often says MSPs can no longer continue to absolve clients of their ignorance or bad decisions if they don't want to listen and implement, their new security recommendations. And so it is through this 3-part series where my goal is to, provide you with some advice, guidance, training, and confidence, really, to go out there, have those candid conversations, and, hopefully make a little bit more money on the side. So as part of the program design process, it is important to review your customer base first to really assess your client's overall risk level and their risk tolerance. And this is really going to help you decide, well, how many programs do you potentially need to consider building and going to market? And so you can do this just by opening up a spreadsheet, a simple Excel spreadsheet, listing, kind of all of your clients down the side, and then along the top, just having your 3 risk categories, your high, medium, and low risk categories, to help them define, help you better define what their risk level or risk rating is going to be. So just to kind of help with these categorizations, I consider a high risk business, and high risk businesses are going to require a more comprehensive, a more advanced, kind of higher end security package, however you want to describe it. But a high risk business would be a business that resides in, banking, financial, healthcare, education, really any industry where that has some sort of regulations or compliance standards that organizations that reside in that industry have to abide to. Also, a high risk organization would tend to be on the larger size, because if they're on the larger size, they've probably accumulated a vast amount of data that would be attractive to adversaries. Because of their size, they probably likely have employees that have access to these, this highly sensitive systems. They have access to this vast amount of customer data, both personal and financial. They have, these employees likely would have access to valuable company intellectual property. Because of their size, they likely have partnerships or relationships with other large key businesses or organizations, and therefore, it might feel that the employees also might have access to that information as well because of the proximity of the relationship. And a high-risk business would be, should it be breached, should it experience some sort of ransomware attack that was successful in stealing data, it would be detrimental to that business, and it could result in irreparable harm, and it could be an extinction event for them. I look at a medium risk business. I still feel that they'd be in more of an advanced type of security program, high end depending, but a medium risk business still has attractive data, has attractive partnership relationships that would be attractive to the bad guys, but they have a little bit of a smaller footprint in terms of data volumes, company size, overall revenues, but I would still classify them, more on the riskier side, because they could still be considered a potential target because of the data or the access to the data that the employees may have. And then a low risk business is one where, maybe they don't need the most comprehensive type of security program. And this is where having maybe 2 programs might make sense, because maybe they just need kind of a foundational or essential security package. But I would look at a lower risk business as being an organization that's smaller in terms of business size. They have a limited number of employees, limited number of partnerships. So they're not really storing or collecting a whole lot of data. A lot of their financial processing is likely outsourced to a third-party company, so it's not necessarily completed in-house. So there's lower risk there, and doesn't really find themselves falling under any sort of regulatory compliance standard. Though I think nowadays most businesses in whatever industry have some sort of compliance that they do have to adhere to. But if these organizations got breached, likely wouldn't be detrimental to the business. The business very likely would still survive, so the breach impact would be low. They probably still have some old books that they can use, or maybe old forms, so they can resort back to being paper-based for a time and not being such a significant impact because of that. But as I'm saying that, CISA is finding that small businesses are actually 3 times more likely to be targeted by threat actors than larger organizations. So again, just because we might be thinking that they're more of a lower risk type of organization, they are still very much on the radar of the bad guys, and they remain on the radar of the bad guys because the bad guys knows that these types of companies are not making the proper investments in their cybersecurity protection coverage like they should be. And they are the ones that many MSPs are still accommodating. They're still allowing them to remain kind of status quo because the MSP is fearing that they might lose the client, because if they start pushing their recommended security packages on these types of clients, the clients may walk, and so they're worried about that. So they're accommodating these clients and still agreeing to support them, even though they're quite deficient from a cybersecurity protection coverage. And so these smaller companies, they're seen as being very easy targets for the bad guys to go after, and so they're still having some pretty phenomenal success because of the organizations and the MSPs kind of lackadaisical approach to security. So you may have companies, as you do your risk rating segmentation, where they may have a low risk profile via your segmentation process, but they're not off the hook. There's still a minimum level of security that has to be implemented and enforced by you, and we're going to talk about that today. So what I was talking about, it is important to educate your customers. And I'm not talking about advocate, selling on FUD, right? That fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's not what we're doing here. But it is up to you to outline the very real consequences that having a laxed security posture can have on the customer's business. And that is that 60% of small and medium-sized businesses who suffer a form of a cyber attack will go under. So we want to look at, how do we implement a program structure that will do our very, very best to help them avoid this kind of devastating outcome, for their business, and then what can you put in place to help avoid this for your customers? So when we're thinking about our security programs and we're thinking about how they should be structured moving forward, really the 2 most important elements that we want to concern ourselves with, in our overall program design philosophy, is our customers' employees and the amount of data that they're collecting and they're using and they're interacting on a daily basis. And when we look at program design, we want to make sure that we're incorporating all the different layers that exist and surround an organization's employees and their data. And you can see from this diagram here that there's 6 distinct layers that we do need to concern ourselves with and make sure that we are properly protecting. So starting from the inner and going out, we have the device layer, we have the application layer, we have the people layer, we have the network layer, we have the internet layer, and then lastly, we have this new cloud layer, because we now need to include thought around, how are we going to secure the cloud in our program design process. And to help with the positioning, with the buy-in, the acceptance of these new security programs that we're going to be positioning shortly, customer education is going to be needed so that you can explain why you are making these changes that you are to, whatever program they happen to be in today. And more importantly, why you now need to start enforcing these changes within your own MSP and on your customers. And so to begin that education process, I think, because I'm a non-technical person, and this is really when it kind of hit home for me when we started selling endpoint detection and response several years ago. Someone took me through this example because I was like, well, why do we need this now? And it just, kind of was eye-opening to me. So I thought it'd be very helpful, as an MSP, because I know you guys know this already, right? Like, how an attack can worm its way throughout one of your customers' environment. But again, think about who you're speaking with. Me, right? Your customers aren't likely technical. They likely won't understand the intricacies around how does an attack operate. So I think it would be beneficial. I'm going to go through a very detailed example explanation of this that actually Lewis Pope wrote for me, but you can dumb this down a little bit, and there's some key takeaways that we'll talk about once we go through this example. But you know, for the most part, your clients that most non-technical won't really understand how that attack happens. So I think it'd be beneficial to take them through, you know, an example, something like this, because I think by educating clients on how an attack works, explaining how the bad guys are able to get into their network, how they can get in to corrupt and steal their data, it will go a long way to setting the stage when it comes to explaining why you're making changes that you are to your programs and why you now need to mandate this new set of security services for them. And I like using this particular example that Lewis designed for me because it can show your customer, it can show your prospect how out of hand a cyber attack can get and how broad cyber defenses now have to be to kind of keep up with these very, very, you know, sophisticated types of threats that are coming at us today. And so we're going to review a sample kill chain. It's a vulnerability that was described as a Microsoft Outlook elevation of privilege vulnerability. And really the risk here of this particular vulnerability, if it wasn't patched, was an attacker could exploit this vulnerability by sending a specially crafted email, which then triggered automatically when it's received and processed by the Outlook client. And via this specially crafted email, it then causes a connection with the victim's machine to an untrusted location, you know, under the attacker's control somewhere out in the universe, which will then leak details about the user's, you know, password credentials, and it's going to leak these password credentials to this untrusted network that the attacker can then, you know, relay to another service to go ahead and authenticate themselves as that victim, or even breach other systems connected to the domain, whether it's on premise or in the cloud. And the big point of distinction that I do want to make with this example here is, unlike the type of breach that's caused when an end user clicks on something that they received in an email that they shouldn't have, they received a link and they clicked on that link. With this type of vulnerability here, if it goes unpatched, the attack potential is that it doesn't actually require any human interaction, and it can sprawl very quickly to touching really everything on that network. And so going through kind of how an attack works, and again, I know you guys know this, but again, if you're trying to explain this to your non-technical you know, prospect, again, I think there's a lot of benefit here. But anyway, so we want to start somewhere out in the world where a threat actor has set up their operations, you know, whether that's in the US, whether it's in a foreign country, doesn't matter. But the attacker has set up some type of server out on the internet somewhere. And so the attacker sends, what I was saying, that specially crafted email that contains a calendar invite, and it's being sent to a user's M365 email address, and it has the payload in it. The Outlook client on that user's computer reaches back out to the M365 account to retrieve it. So it's syncing, send, receives emails, just like Outlook normally does. So really nothing malicious is happening yet, you know, nothing weird is happening yet. But once Outlook downloads that email, it processes that malicious calendar invite that's included in it. And then it's locally calling to this host, which is then going to run a command against the local machine. And, you know, this remote host could be anything, right? It could be an IP address, it could be a fully qualified domain name, host name, whatever the attacker is looking to exploit. All they have to do is put in the address for the infrastructure that they control. Then it's going to try and make the victim's computer authenticate back out to its own infrastructure somewhere out in the cloud, out in the world, right? The attacker is listening, and so they're going to try and make, you know, multiple you know, server message block protocol attempts. That communication, they're going to try and leverage that communication protocol that's used by Microsoft Windows that's used for users to share files, folder, data security, and they're sharing across a secure network. So there's going to be multiple requests that are made. NTLM authentications that are going to be happening here, where the attacker is trying to get the NTLM hash, and it's really kind of the hash of the victim's password credentials. And then once the attacker has the hash of the victim, they can use that to either, in replay attacks, and so they can attempt to crack it. Kind of really depends on what the resource and the capabilities are of the attacker. But again, this is kind of all happening in the background without any interaction from the end user. And so if all you have at play in your client's environment was maybe just an antivirus, or maybe just an endpoint protection solution, and you're not monitoring mail, you're not monitoring network traffic, you might have missed, all of this happening up to this point. But this is where the opportunities for the attacker now grows. This is where the attacker now has a few different options where they can use those cracked credentials. So Lewis built in 2 different types of attack scenarios. The first attack scenario is that they can use the hash and the credentials to gain access into the victim's M365 account, or into their intranet, or any federated cloud services that are connected to the M365 or intranet account. So basically, whatever the victim has access to, the attacker now has access to as well. If the victim has a Microsoft identity, that anything that Microsoft identity is attached to, the attacker potentially has access to that now, which will allow them to easily exfiltrate data from the SharePoint, from the OneDrive, whatever that Microsoft identity access will gain them access to. And then they're also going to get to know what the public facing IP address is of the computer that opened that compromised email that was sent, which means that there's a pretty good chance that it's likely the public facing IP address of their VPN as well. So the attacker now has valid credentials to go and try and authenticate against the victim's VPN service. And if they get lucky and they are able to get authenticated, then they're now connected to the organization's VPN as well. And so what does this mean? The attacker now has their first significant foothold into the company's network, and they can choose to do a lot of things. One of the first things that they'll likely attempt is just reconnaissance, lateral movement, to really try and find out, if there's any other vulnerable systems that they can take advantage of, or where that vulnerable data lies that they can access. Or they may just go for an RDP session to the endpoint that they can find. Then the attacker will create persistence in the environment that they've gained access to. So if they happen to lose VPN or access to the compromised user account, they can still get back in to continue their attack. And so they will create persistence in a number of different ways, in a number of different locations, because they don't want to be kicked out. They want to always have that foothold and maintain that foothold in the network. And so they're likely going to set up persistence on an endpoint in the network, or set up persistence out in the cloud by creating other new accounts that they can use. And at this point, the attacker may continue to maybe hang around in the environment just to see what else they can find out, just by poking around. So more lateral movements, more reconnaissance, not only to the main network, but reconnaissance out to the victim's cloud infrastructure as well, to see what they can find there. So once they've found items of value, that's when they're going to know what steps they're going to need to take next. They'll know what data that they want to take and what areas that they're going to attack. Or they just may move on to the next steps, and in this example, let's say that they go ahead and they launch a combo extortion and ransomware attack. So here the attacker will begin exfiltrating any valuable data, network data, endpoint data, anything out in the cloud that they discovered during the reconnaissance period. If this is valuable, seemingly invaluable, they're going to start moving that data out in a number of different ways. And then after they have the data that they want, they will then probably seek to remove your capability to recover from that ransomware that they're about to drop in the hope that they can improve their chances of a payout. Because the reconnaissance work that they did earlier should have told them where you keep the backups, and they're going to go after them, if they're on a server, if they're accessible on the local network, or even from, outside using those credentials that they compromised, or maybe some new additional compromised credentials that they have generated. And then they're going to use that persistence that they have on the endpoint to then download the ransomware payload from the internet. They're then going to execute the application within the environment, or maybe use a living off the land attack using PowerShell, really up to them. But they will get that ransomware payload on the endpoint somehow. Then the ransomware is on the device. It's going to be executed. There'll be a simultaneous execution of not just the ransomware attack against the endpoint, but anything else that the endpoint has access to, even potentially out into the cloud infrastructure if the attacker does have that skill set, which results in encryption of any data that the attacker has access to, regardless of if it's on a compromised device, a network share, cloud resource, or the compromised device it has access to. And it will likely also result in the destruction of the victim's backups, because that's what the bad guys are doing now as well. With the last action then being where the attacker sends that victim that ransomware extortion message, to tell them that not only has their data been encrypted, but they're also going to have to pay them if they want to get access to their network and access to that data back. So that was really complicated. I know that, and I know that this example kind of gets hard to read and hard to follow after the first couple of clicks, but the whole idea around this is to show how complex these attack chains can be and highlight how cyber attacks are evolving. We no longer can just blame the user. Now, there's still a big chunk of the time the user's fault, but it's not always the user now that's responsible for initiating the attack because they clicked on something that they shouldn't have. With this type of attack scenario, there is no individual in the middle of this. With this particular attack scenario, did it really matter what the user was doing? The user didn't really have a role in any of this because all they did was turn on their computer. They opened up Outlook. Then Outlook went and downloaded the email that had that malicious calendar invite in it, and Outlook just did what it was supposed to do. But and then the other thing with this type of attack is the end user doesn't really experience anything. They don't know what's going on in the background until that ransomware message pops up. You'll also notice from this example, and again, this is kind of another takeaway, again, not so much the details, but if you saw as I was going through it, that attack is touching every layer that's surrounding the customer's employees and the data. And if you noticed, in many cases, each layer was crossed more than once. And this is really meant to drive home the point why a layered approach to security is now required, and why you as the MSP really have to enforce the strategy, because nothing on its own can provide 100% complete protection from a cyber attack. So if you only had AV on that client's account or endpoint detection on the device on your client's machines, that's not enough. You can see how difficult it would be to kind of keep up with all of that. So when a cyber attack does occur, because it will, it is about when, not if, you do want to make sure that you have the right set of tools, that you have the policies, the response plans in place to quickly understand what happened, how that attack came to be, along with the ability to start that remediation recovery process as quickly as possible so you can get your customers back up and running and back to business. Because again, when their doors are closed, the employees aren't working, that's costing the organization money. So now I just kind of want to use the same illustration again, repurpose it to explain why your packages do need to change, because things are very different now. And so the services that you're recommending today are likely very different from what you were recommending previously if you haven't done any sort of updates in a while. And so when we look at the customer journey when it comes to security, 5-10 years ago, the traditional MSP's answer to security was AV patch, firewall backup. If you had those services, you were fine. They provided pretty decent protection coverage. Threats weren't as sophisticated. People were working in offices and they were behind corporate firewalls. And the thought process was, as long as you had a really good, solid AV, you'll be fine. But in today's threat landscape, we know that that is no longer enough. And so again, looking at our layered network diagram, you can see with this old approach of AV patch firewall backup that there are layers that are left underprotected, and there are layers that are missing protection coverage completely. You know, there's layers that are completely unprotected. And here I'm talking about the cloud layer, the internet layer, and the people layer specifically. So there are, under this existing program, significant gaps in the customer security coverage. And so the old minimum standard for essential security, it does have to be upgraded because we now have to plug these gaps that have surfaced. And so MSPs really need to develop and promote a more comprehensive type of security package so that we can plug these gaps that we're now seeing and move beyond just focusing on the endpoint and considering, you know, implementing new security solutions like, you know, first replacing AV at the device level with something like an endpoint detection response, because EDR just provides a more broader, more advanced protection coverage, especially against zero-day threats. EDR also comes with rollback capabilities to get the device back to a pre-attack healthy state should something get through. And so this is where we're starting to build in the cyber resiliency services that are now needed, which are just as important as the threat prevention and the threat detection services. We're also building in mail security with email filtering and spam protection. We're building in, you know, DNS URL filtering. We're moving in, you know, or including dark web monitoring, and this is all kind of done at the internet layer. You know, at the network layer, this is where we're adding in, you know, network device discovery. You know, here thinking of, you know, SentinelOne's Ranger product that will alert you to any new unknown new device that might have appeared recently on the network, like any IoT devices, camera systems that might be trying to gain access into the network, so that you can then investigate and make the decision around whether those devices are legit or not and whether they should be approved to be on the network or not. Because the thing is, you can't secure and protect what you don't know about. And so you need to be alerted whenever a new device is added into the network. And then looking at the people layer, you know, making sure that we're putting MFA in there, that we're putting some sort of password management in there. When we look at security user training, you know, whether this is something that you are able to do yourself, or I know there's a lot of MSPs that are using, you know before or Breach Secure Now, very popular with MSPs. At the application layer, putting in vulnerability management, making sure that we're adding in backup recovery testing. Maybe depending on the risk rating of the client, we may have to put in some standby systems so that we can ensure that all the data can be recovered, again, so should something get through, because nothing is 100% guaranteed. So we do need to include backup in every program that we're putting out there. And I still will have conversations with MSPs that don't include backup in their program. And I think it is probably the most important feature of a security program, because it really is kind of your last line of defense. And then adding in additional security benefits by wrapping a program with kind of a managed detection response service that can provide even greater visibility and protection coverage, and includes monitoring and protecting of the cloud layer as well now, because as we've just seen with that previous attack scenario, is pretty convoluted, but some breaches occur that really aren't that end user's fault. And so MSPs need to be prepared for and protect their customers from those types of attacks as well. And so that attack scenario that we went through in that previous slide, it was a completely feasible attack chain leveraging a Microsoft vulnerability. And there's really nothing preventing an attacker from using another similar type of vulnerability to kind of execute the same thing. So really, MSPs can no longer really remain focused on, doing what they can to prevent the end user from clicking on something they shouldn't. Malicious links, malicious websites, that's important. It's still critical, but we have to be mindful now on how to avoid attacks that aren't user initiated and don't require a user to kind of click on something to kick kind of the whole process off. Because in that previous scenario, no amount of endpoint protection was going to save that customer from experiencing that breach. So we do need to go and back up the endpoint protection and everything else that we're delivering, and wrapping, a managed detection and response service around that, so that these types of non-user initiated attack scenarios can be readily detected, and so that you can be notified about them very, very quickly, so that you know how you're going to respond, and so that you can begin remediation, because time is of the essence in any type of attack like that. And so the benefit of kind of wrapping an MDR service around your advanced security program is all those different technologies that we're implementing at all the different layers, they get ingested into the MDR SIM. And that's going to help you to correlate events much more easily in the event that something did happen. So really, just kind of showing what that complete picture would look like today in terms of what is needed to, kind of going back to my term, kind of bubble wrapping an organization's employees and their network in order to protect, their most important asset outside of its employees, which is its data. And again, the idea here is to really help educate customers that old model, AV, patch, endpoint, firewall, backup, it's not enough. There's gaps, and that's why changes are needed from a cybersecurity program design standpoint. Each security solution on its own, while good, it does have its own set of limitations and can't provide 100% guaranteed protection coverage. So we have to take a layered approach to our security structure, because that's the only way we're going to be able to provide our best defense against cyber attacks. And this type of enhanced, more robust coverage is going to raise our prices. It's going to raise your prices to your customers, but side benefit is you'll make increased MRR. And that's why I have a third backup dedicated to how do we handle those pricing objections, because I'm sure you're probably going to hear them. So just for a point of clarification, just wanted to define, if MDR is this term that is out there, has a variety of different definitions. For our intents and purposes, it's a managed detection and response, and it provides managed threat detection, investigation, containment of cyber threats, and it's really based on a turnkey mix of security tool sets and platforms where you're providing 24/7 availability of highly skilled security trained experts. So it has a SOC built into it, whether that's either using your own SOC setup or whether you're deciding to partner and leverage, the SOC of a third-party organization. However way that you deliver it, it has now become a critically important feature that has to be included in your newly reimagined security programs, because organizations are implementing more complex hybrid infrastructure type environments today. And so cloud security is just as important as network and endpoint security when it comes to protecting a customer's employees and its data. All right, which all of that buildup brings us to the program packaging section, and a question that I do answer a lot around: how should I be packaging up my programs? So looking at how do you build the right security matrix. So again, not the prettiest of slides, but this, I wanted to show an example of this security services program matrix that we've created. You can go and download the Excel version there in the handout section. If you have issues downloading it, just put in the question panel, email me, and I'll get that Excel file over to you. Now, I could have just cut to the chase, gone right to this slide, right? But I did feel it was important to put some context behind this to explain why we have structured the programs the way we have, with the levels that we have, with the services that have been included at each level. Because depending on the overall risk level of the customers or the new markets you might be interested in pursuing, high, medium, low, that is what's going to determine how many programs you should be building and taking to market, and what you should be including in those programs. And so this chart outlines kind of our new approach. We're recommending 2 program levels now to keep it, I think, simple and effective. An essentials program, I've had MSPs say, well, good, better, best. I don't really like that, but I would look at your essentials as kind of that good program, and it's really focused on the end user and their endpoints. And then we have an advanced program, and this would be your best program, and it's focused on the user, their endpoints, and the entire network and cloud infrastructure as a whole. Each program level addresses a certain risk rating classification, and that is really what's driving all of this. You know, each program is designed to specifically protect businesses based on how you've classified them from an overall risk rating perspective. Again, centered around risk tolerance, risk acceptance, predominant risk ownership, risk mitigation tactics, and the potential breach impact and return to operations objectives. So as a little aside, when you're presenting this program, I am assuming that you are targeting more of the traditional managed services type of client. It's aimed at those organizations who don't have any internal IT people, so you would be considered their outsourced offsite IT department. Definitely an opportunity here to promote your security programs to larger clients that have internal IT in more of that co-managed model. That's not really the market that I'm talking about today. We're going to be talking about co-managed next month. You know, there's nothing to say you can pull out, you know, certain blocks from here and sell it a la carte. But when I'm talking today about program design and the programs here and on my next set of boot camps, I'm really talking about the traditional managed services client type. Also, this is just an initial framework, you know, to help get you started if you don't have anything in place today. Each program level has its own target customer type based, again, on whatever their risk level or that risk rating is. At the higher level, the advanced program, I think there's probably a little bit more room to change this up, you know, if you feel it's necessary. Again, you know your customers in your market best. There may be some additional technologies that you deem to be important for a certain layer that might be missing from this chart. And if you're, you know, changing this up or adding some things, let me know. You know, Lewis and I and David Weeks and a couple of other people here at Enable developed this. But if you're including a certain tool at a certain level, yeah, let me know, because this is always going to be a work in progress. But the point that I really kind of want to make with this slide is, with the Essentials program, you do need to have a minimum viable security package. And I call that Essentials program. And this is the package that every client at a minimum gets enrolled into. Because again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, that a la carte or that reactive type of program where you're letting your customers kind of pick and choose what services they want to get from you, that is a very, very risky mode of operation now. It is important to upgrade them, standardize them at least to this Essentials program as that first step to help mitigate and reduce that risk. So breaking this this matrix down, the first program level, again, that I'm calling the Essential Security Program, this is the base program level that an MSP would offer. It's that minimum set of core services that every company has to have, and I really encourage you not to sell below this. I really recommend not stripping out any services that are listed here in a desire to reduce the average price because you're trying to meet some customers' monthly budget or preconceived price point. Because once you start stripping out a service, you've created a gap, you've created a hole in their protection coverage, and you've made it a whole lot easier for the bad guys to get in. And now your customer has become a weak link for your MSP. And so this would be the program that you would position really to your lower risk clients that you've identified via your risk segmentation exercise from earlier. Again, those that are in non-regulated industries, if they happen to experience an attack, the breach impact would be a little bit, you know, it'd be lower. Yes, it may take them a little bit longer to reopen their doors to get back to work, but they would probably still survive. So the return to operations objectives might be a little bit more flexible. I look at this as being just a good entry-level program because it does primarily focus on the employees and their endpoints. So it's kind of that first layer of bubble wrap. It includes the basics to help detect and avoid an attack, but also provides the ability for more timely remediation, you know, kind of after that attack occurs, because we do have the enhanced EDR protection coverage. We have the rollback capabilities in there. I'm including the SentinelOne vigilance service, you know, where they can kind of jump in and assist when required. Because again, nothing's 100% guaranteed. now more than ever, when, not if, the organizations can be attacked. So cyber resiliency, building and enforcing a quicker mean time to resolution, it still even is important even at the essentials program. I look at this also being a program, if you still have customers that are time material, or if you have customers that are reactive or in an a la carte type of subscription model, these are your highest risk customers to your MSP. They're the ones that are being probably the most targeted by the bad guys. But if you can get those types of customers at least upgraded into this type of program level, it will help you start standardizing your client base and start improving their security posture. And it's going to help improve your security posture as an MSP. So in designing this new program structure, you can see that I've aligned it to the NIST cybersecurity framework, identify, protect, detect, response, and recover that we spoke about earlier. So at a minimum, when we talk about the identify function, this is using your RMM to conduct that asset discovery, so you can collect the data on all the different systems, the hardware, the software that exists within the customer's environment, get those devices imported into your RMM so that you can regularly monitor and manage those different hardware and software pieces. Because again, from a security perspective, you can't secure what you don't know about. So every device, every application that is part of your client's network has to be monitored by your RMM. And then conducting that security risk assessment each quarter is also part of this program, because it's a means to demonstrate to your customer that you are delivering on your commitments, that you're doing what you can, within the program, within the budget that they've given you to protect their network, their data, their employees from breaches. It also helps to answer that question that, maybe you've heard, nothing ever breaks. We never seem to have any issues. So why are we paying you all this money every month? Looking at the protect function here, this is everything that you would find in really a standard proactive program with respect to delivering regular scheduled preventative maintenance of all the network assets, including regular Mac, Windows, third-party application patching, because it is very important that we're keeping those devices up to date and performing optimally. We're also including other security services like DNS filtering, web security, mail security, password management. We do want to make sure that we are implementing and enforcing MFA. At the endpoint, that we are putting some sort of endpoint detection and response solution in place. In our example, I'm including our SentinelOne EDR Complete license for this program level. I'm also including some basic level of security awareness training. And again, this may not be the whole know before or breach secure now. Even if you're providing a couple of hours of end user phishing training a couple of times a year that we're including in this program, if you're able to deliver training like that, just letting the employees know what to be looking out for, and just kind of getting that education going that, you don't need to click on every link that you get sent and every email that you get sent. So even starting to include a little bit of security awareness training there. Looking at the detect function, this would be covered off by the EDR solution that's implemented, has the benefit of an EDR. It has multiple detection engines, so it's going to be able to automatically detect attacks across the organization's endpoint environment, regardless of how they're delivered to the machine. Then we're looking at the respond function. This would be based on your own EDR response protocol that you've developed and have in place, utilizing a combination of automated remediation that comes via the EDR agent, as well as your own tech involvement, or if you are using the SentinelOne Complete and the Vigilance, then relying on the Vigilance team to respond and deal with the threat that are detected. Then looking at the recover function, implementation of backup. Here we're making sure that we're backing up all the servers, all the endpoints, the M365 accounts at the customer's location, email, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. Again, backup does have to be included even at this program level. It can't be optional. It can't be sold as an add-on to try or pulled out to try and reduce that monthly price. Because when it comes to the endpoints, I do want to include backup of the workstations here, but we're not including the full, if you're aware of how Cove works, We have a documents license, and that's what I'm really advocating at this program level. Just putting in, even though we're doing M365 backup, the documents backup is that extra insurance policy. You know, because employees, I know I do it, sometimes I don't put things in one point. I'll have things stored locally on my computer. So if I'm that type of person and something happens, and you're, you know, just throw a documents license on your employees or on the customer's employees' workstations, at least you're able to get their Word, their Excel, their PDFs, their PowerPoints, in the event that something happens. So it is important to make sure that, yes, we're backing up the M365 user account, but that we're backing up, you know, just what's on the desktop as well. Because from a customer experience perspective, you want to make sure that you're backing up those critical files just in case something has happened. Because as I recall, I have a couple of critical files that are just sitting on my desktop as I speak that I can't get into my OneDrive. Make a note of that. And anyway, so with Cove, if you're familiar with it, we do have a backup license that we call documents for just this very type of scenario. Very inexpensive. I think we charge $1 or $1.10 or something like that. Setup is all automated, and it just provides, again, that extra piece of backup protection, that extra piece of insurance that could be extremely valuable in the event that something did happen. And then with the EDR, the recover function, we have that enhanced rollback capabilities that are built into the agent. We also have the potential actions that are taken by the vigilance team for building that in. With rollback, we're going to be able to restore Windows to a pre-attack healthy state by not only remediating the machine, but automatically restoring, you know, the damaged file system information. And this capability essentially rewinds the effects of the ransomware attacks by being able to bring that infected machine back into an operable state. And then we're adding in services like consulting and reporting, and consulting here is really around asset lifecycle planning, you know, that you're going to include as part of their, you know, twice a year executive business review. That's where you're going to, you know, review some of the hardware, software reports to kind of help them start planning if any changes need to be made, and they can start budgeting for that accordingly. And then in regards to the support services at the very bottom, I know it's small there. While the vigilance service is included in the monthly price, you know, when a security incident is detected, any additional work that's recommended by the vigilance team that's kind of outside of the scope of work, and you're going to need to complete this, typically this would be billed at whatever your time material rates are. I'm not building in any help desk calls, any emails, chat, emergency support, reactive support, vendor management. None of that is included in this program level. It would be billed additionally at the end of the month, or maybe you sell them a block of hours and you pull that time off of a block of hours. Okay. Now looking at the advanced program level and really talking about how it differs from the essentials program in terms of its depth and breadth of security protection coverage. Again, if we're using kind of the analogy of good, better, best, I don't have a better program, I have a good and a best. This would be your best. So with the advanced program, this is where we're moving beyond just focusing on securing the endpoints, but we're expanding our scope to provide better security protection coverage, increased, accelerated, quicker cyber resiliency for the entire network. So again, we're moving beyond just the endpoints here. So in this program, we're also covering and protecting from a continuous threat monitoring standpoint, network devices like your routers and your switches, your SaaS applications, VPNs, firewalls, and whatever the cloud infrastructure that may be there in place, you know, whether it's M365, Azure. So this is where we're really beginning to see the shift in risk ownership away from the business owner and over to the MSP. And so this is where, you know, your MSP is beginning to assume more and more of the customer's business risk. And because of that, they need to be enrolled in a more advanced program like this that contains a more advanced set of security features and consulting services so that you can provide better protection coverage, faster mean time to investigation, which provides a faster mean time to response, and provides an overall faster remediation, which helps to minimize really the potential impacts of a security event. So this program also provides a shorter return to operations window to help get the company's employees back to work, again, as quickly as possible post-attack, because when, not if, that attack was going to occur. Because again, if the employees aren't working, the organization is losing money. So I think this benefit alone can really help explain the ROI and help justify why this program is going to cost more than your essentials program, or more whatever they happen to be paying today. So with this advanced program, we are including advanced technology so that we can properly and secure and protect all 6 layers surrounding the customer's employees and the data that they're accessing. And then what we're doing is we're wrapping that MDR service around it. And I always think of that MDR as kind of closing the loop, when it comes to monitoring and support, when it comes to cloud, network, firewalls, because we are wrapping kind of that MDR SOC as a service solution around the program. Because each of these layers, these 6 layers, the benefit is that it acts as a source of knowledge and insight for the MDR service to provide that broader, deeper level security protection coverage than what we're excluding in the Essentials program. Because customers that you enroll in this program, they do require that deeper, more comprehensive coverage. And so this is the type of program that would be aimed at your medium to high or high risk customers from your segmentation exercise. So any businesses that you support that are in the financial or banking industries, in the healthcare, in the schools, education vertical, if you support local and state governments, or any organization where you're having a conversation with them and you've deemed that the breach impact would be high if they did fall victim to an attack, those companies would be a good candidate for this program as well. Or if they tell you, if something happens to us, we have to get our doors back open and we have to get our employees back to work ASAP. So if they have a return to operations objective that is high, they would be a good candidate for this type of program. So what's included in the advanced program? Again, the way the program was designed was to cover at a minimum each of these 6 layers that now surrounds the customer's employees and its data, because we are including cloud security at this program level. So if you allow your customers to strip out any of these services, again, we're opening up a gateway for the bad guys to get in. And this is what we're trying to avoid, with this type of program. So, but I do think at this program, you can be a little bit more flexible in terms of what services that you are including, but just kind of keep that fundamental philosophy in mind. We're building these programs from a breach impact, risk mitigation, cyber resiliency, return to operations standpoint. We're not building it from a pricing standpoint. We want to focus on the consequences that we're trying to avoid and the outcomes that we're trying to provide. Because if a medium or high risk organization is attacked and goes out of business because they couldn't recover from that attack, I feel that that's a much worse fate than them having to spend whatever is a fair amount deemed necessary for proper cybersecurity protection coverage and response, like what we're outlining in this program. So obviously with the advanced program, we're supplementing what is being included in the essentials. We are beefing this up a little bit, where we're conducting a monthly security risk assessment on the customer's network. So we're upping it from the quarterly that was in the essentials program. We're also, again, including that monitoring asset discovery capabilities through the installation of that SentinelOne Ranger agent. Again, we need to become aware of any IoT devices or any other devices, camera systems that might be trying to gain access into the network. So this allows you to take that corrective action by either blocking it from the network, or maybe it's fine and you can go and work and approve it, and then you add it to kind of your scope of work, but you're being made aware of it. Because again, from a security perspective, we can't protect what we don't know about. So we can't allow unknown rogue agents to be connecting in without you being aware of that, because that just increases the chances of them falling victim to attack. Looking at the protect function, so we're adding in more advanced security monitoring services at the perimeter. Here we're adding in dark web monitoring. Important because the more an organization's data is found in the dark web, the more likely it's been found to experience a cyber attack. So we do want to include a service like this to help safeguard sensitive data, because if that data is leaked or sold on the dark web, that is what can lead to data breaches, financial losses, reputational damage. Because cyber criminals, they will often sell or share stolen credentials, malware, exploits on the dark web, before the attack is even executed. So if you can implement kind of continuous dark web monitoring, that will provide you with visibility into your customers' data risk exposure. It will help you understand where potential threats might be coming from, how they're being targeted, which will then allow you to proactively adjust your defenses to effectively neutralize the attack before it's actually launched by the cyber criminals. Also, maybe looking at including device disencryption. Again, the vulnerability management gets added in at this layer. This is where we do want to build in more advanced security awareness training more often. So again, many MSPs will work with Breach Secure Now, Know Before, and put in kind of a more formal third-party security awareness training program. From the endpoint detection standpoint, we're actually downgrading the EDR license here from the complete license down to the control. We're removing the vigilance service because we now have the MDR service that's being included here. And it's that solution that's going to provide us the deep visibility, the threat hunting services, the response, the remediation services. So we don't need to pay for that service twice. So we don't need to replicate that particular service because it's now via the MDR service where it is going to correlate all the data coming in the event of attack. It's going to help investigators understand how the attack occurred, how it rolled itself out, what's needed to be done to avoid, falling victim to an attack like this again in the future. All that insight's now going to come from the SIM, the MDR SIM from the advanced program. And then we're also providing additional guidance, best practices support when it comes to data access controls, application controls. We might be helping create some security policies here, making sure we're enforcing the security policies and the controls. When we look at the detect function, this is where we are adding in the continuous threat monitoring of whatever MDR, XDR service that you're using, whether it's something that you're delivering yourself or whether you're working with a third party to detect that unusual activity within the environment. Either way, that has to get built into this program. When we're looking at the respond function, again, this relates back to whatever MDR, XDR service you're providing. Again, depending on who's delivering the service, that's really going to help you to explain, to your prospect, to your customer, what are your responsibilities in this area and how that's going to be handled. If it's you and your MSP and your SOC team that's delivering this service, explain what your deliverables will be in this area for when attack is detected. Or if you're using the services of a third-party organization, then you want to make sure that you are discussing what their response coverage will be for that. And then the recover function, this is where we are including, again, additional services to help improve that return to operations for the employees in the event something does happen, or, where they're knocked offline or they happen to lose access to their data. So this is where we're moving beyond just the documents backup license, and we are fully backing up the workstation, even if they have M365 on it. We're still doing complete desktop backup beyond the critical documents. Obviously, the server perspective, the full data system state backup. We're including recovery testing here, standby image as well. We're, the rollback capabilities of the EDR. We might be building in some DR planning here. Mail archiving we might be including here. And we're also bumping up the data retention of the MDR to 365 days. I think the default is 14 days, could be wrong, but we're bumping it up to a full year because that's often required for organizations that need to adhere to some sort of regulatory compliance. And then for the consulting, the reporting services, we're including kind of higher end consulting around compliancy enforcements, If they're deviant against any compliancy standards, we're going to help them, close that gap and get into compliance. And typically, we're increasing the cadence of the executive business reviews from twice a year to quarterly. Then from the support services standpoint, typically all reactive help desk calls, email, chat, emergency support calls, all that vendor relationship management that might be needed, that is all included at this program level. The only thing I'm not including here is true incident response. If something did happen, to get that client back and running, even if they're on a program like that, could take a couple of weeks. Typically, that is not included in the monthly fee. You would have like an IR retainer or something like that. But general reactive help desk calls, email, chat, emergency support, all that would be typically included in this program. Okay, so again, a question I do get asked, and I just went through kind of what my answer was, but should I have one program that everyone gets enrolled to, or should I have multiple program levels? Again, depending on who you've listened to, because I'm not the only one out there talking about how to build security programs. There are industry experts out there that really feel that one program is all that an MSP should have moving forward. And they build one program, sell one program. Every customer has to be enrolled in that one program. I can see how that would be a good approach for some MSPs. But it's something that I don't necessarily agree with. And that's why I have a matrix that actually shows two different program levels in this particular session. And I say this because not all customers are exposed to the same level of risk. And depending on the vertical, the employee size, the types, the breadth of data being collected and being relied upon, it's going to have varying degrees of consequences and impact should they become breached. So I don't feel that a one-size-fits-all approach really works. But at a minimum, every client should be in your essentials program, especially if you have those time material, reactive, a la carte types of customers. Those need to be upgraded into at least this base level program. So if you only had a security program like an advanced security program, I think it'd be a very difficult conversation to try and upsell kind of a time material client and get them all the way into an advanced program. I just feel that they would never make that leap and be very, very difficult because it'd probably be way out of their price range. But I think if you have two programs, the Essentials program could be used, even if it's in, initially in the first couple of years, migrate those customers, those smaller, more reactive clients into that Essentials program, and then have your advanced program for everyone else. Because I do think that's a good mix. And then after time, as you gain more experience in selling and delivering these programs, as you up level and improve the security of your existing clients, then you might be able to move them into the advanced program after that. Because despite whether you have one program or two programs, it is important to think about building your programs in a way where you're offering a bundled set of security services. So if you are still selling services in an a la carte manner, like EDR on its own, or backup on its own, or mail filtering on its own, and kind of those one-off type of scenarios, again, you're opening up your MSP to considerable risk. But I think you're also losing on the opportunity to generate higher levels of MRR for your MSP. I like to use a car analogy when I talk about this. And the analogy is, say there's two dealers that are selling the same make of car. Dealer 1 only sells kind of the fully loaded model, while dealer 2, they sell the same make, but they don't sell just the fully loaded, but they kind of sell the lower level models as well. They basically allow their customers to kind of pick and choose what features they want to pay for. A lot of the times, it's going to be dealer 1 who only sells the fully loaded model that will end up growing faster and being more profitable. Dealer number 2 that kind of sells all the different model trim levels, they generally won't experience the same level of growth and profitability. And it's because with practice, it doesn't take 30–40% more effort to close a fully loaded model deal than it does to close a deal for a lower end model that might be missing features. The effort of the salesperson is pretty much going to be the same, assuming the sales acumen and the talent is there. So kind of relating this back to the MSP world, if you're going to spend your time spinning up a marketing and sales campaign to just sell EDR or just sell backup or just sell mail filtering on its own in a non-bundled way, I think you're wasting the opportunity, because I'll have MSPs email me and saying, oh, Stefanie, I'm trying to find an EDR campaign in Market Builder because I want to sell EDR to my customers. Or Stefanie, I think I want a DNS filter campaign to sell DNS filter to my customers. If that's the way you're doing your sales and marketing, I think you're wasting the opportunity, because if you're going to go through all that work anyways, why not put that time and energy into selling kind of a bundled set of services like your Essentials program or your Advanced program that provides higher value, improved security coverage, improved cyber resiliency for when something happens? Because when you sell in a bundle versus a tool, that's really the difference between it being a technical sale, where if you're just selling a tool, there's only so much money you can make off of selling a tool, versus making this a value-based sale where you can charge higher prices. And again, we're going to talk about pricing next week, because my feeling is if you're going to speak to the prospect anyway, again, we don't want to waste that sales conversation. Speak to them about one of your security programs instead, and not just a singular product. And then you get to benefit from the increased deal size and improved MRR. Because there is a lot of benefits to your MSP, from standardizing your program offerings and moving away from that a la carte or that bespoke type of programs. Because, looking at you in who you are the MSP, you are the trusted advisor and the expert, you are the solutions architect with security knowledge and the expertise. You are responsible for designing programs based on market trends and the new threat actors that are emerging into the space. You live in this world day in and day out. But if you think about who your audience is, we're targeting business owners that are largely non-technical in nature. They are not the experts. And so you can't allow them to make their own decisions on what security features, security surface should or should not be completed or included in their program. And they shouldn't be allowed to remove certain features because there's some sort of budget or price point that they have to hit. Because if you allow that to happen, this is where you're introducing unnecessary risk for both yourself and your customers. Because if something does happen to your customers because they're not in one of your recommended security programs, then the likelihood is high that something's going to happen. One of their employees are going to click on something that they shouldn't have, and they're going to end up getting breached. And at the end of the day, who are they going to blame? They're likely going to be wanting to blame you as their MSP, because again, their perception is you are their MSP. They're paying you to look after their computers. And so if they get breached, they feel that is on you, not them. And so it is very important to have those difficult conversations up front, have the confidence and the ability to defend your security packages, or be willing to walk away and maybe allow a lesser MSP who doesn't align themselves to a cybersecurity framework like we're showing here, allow that MSP to support them and assume that risk themselves, because that's not really the type of customer you want to have anyway. MSPs want a business partner who will respect their advice and make the necessary investments in their network security because they recognize your expertise, which they recognize they don't have. And so by introducing standardized programs that are rooted in the same technology stack, it's going to help improve your service delivery, because all the programs are going to contain the same set of features. They're based on the same set of software solutions. So it's going to make it a lot easier to provide more consistent support, and it's going to improve how quickly computer and network issues get resolved that do pop up. And so that's going to reduce the overall mean time to resolution. This also in turn is going to make better use of your technology, your technical staff, from the service desk support reps to the level 2, the level 3 engineers, because they only need to be experts and keep up on training on whatever your preferred software security is, versus them having to try and keep up on your 3 or 4 endpoint security products, or your 6 or 7 different backup products, or your 4 different types of mail security products. They only have to train and keep up on your preferred tech stack. And so again, it's going to make it a lot easier to manage, scale as you grow, because without standardization, it'd be very difficult to scale and remain efficient if you continue to let your customers kind of create and customize their own programs, or you inherit software and you allow them to keep that software, which now your team has to manage. And so again, the last benefit of program standardization provides you the ability to obtain more consistent program margins and improve profitability in the long run. So again, lastly, just want to reinforce, if it hasn't hit home yet, that we are taking kind of this layered approach to security. The unfortunate truth is that trying to secure and protect against all known vulnerabilities, a huge task in and of itself. It is important to educate our customers that no MSP can guarantee 100% operational safety, security against cyber attacks. And so that's why you've designed your programs to include kind of multiple tool sets and multiple processes aimed at each of the different layers that are surrounding the customer's employees and its data. Because again, not so much about risk prevention, but increasingly becoming more and more about planning and resiliency, and ensuring that you have the structure and the plan in place to allow your customers to recover quickly and efficiently post-attack. And it's really about minimizing the amount of downtime, minimizing and mitigating the impact of that downtime when a client does get attacked. So for anyone that is looking for more in-depth information on what I was talking about today or what is coming in the next couple of weeks, I encourage you to download our new Selling Security playbook that I've written, a QR code there that hopefully works for everyone. It's a pretty comprehensive document. It's about 100 pages, I think, but it's kind of the companion guide to what I spoke about today and what's coming in the next couple of weeks. So if you need a copy, if the QR code isn't working for you, send me an email, let me know, and I'll get that over to you. So a couple of next steps as we wrap up. If you feel that your boot camps or your existing programs could use a little bit of refresher, this will be available on demand in probably about a week or so. If you need a copy of this sooner, I can send you over a raw copy of it. Just let me know, because it'll take about a couple of weeks for that to get loaded. Make sure that you register for part 2 of this series, where we're going to be talking about pricing. If you haven't downloaded the cybersecurity program matrix, I also have the partner education slide that kind of goes through that really convoluted how an attack works. So if you wanted to use that at some degree within your sales process, it's there. Any questions? In about 42 minutes, I'm going to be offering office hours. So join me in my office hours, or just send me an email, work with your PSM, and we will get those questions answered for you. All right, so if everybody can indulge me for just one more minute, if you've attended any Head Nerd Bootcamp in the past, we're always looking at getting your feedback, making sure that we are delivering quality, relevant education to you. You just spent a good chunk of your day with me. I want to make sure it's a good use of your time. If there's something that you're looking to hear that I didn't talk about, let me know. I update this bootcamp pretty much every time I deliver it, because that's how quickly cybersecurity and cybersecurity prevention is changing. So if there's anything that you're hoping I talk about that I didn't, love that feedback. All right, perfect. Appreciate everybody that voted. And just another QR code for office hours. Again, that's taking place in 42 minutes. As well as the next set of boot camps that are coming up to finish off this series. So next week, it's strategies to pricing your new cybersecurity program. So we're going through our costing worksheet, and then the 29th, strategies to selling, because again, these are going to cost more. Your customers are probably going to be a little shocked by it, but I want you selling these to them. And so we're going to talk about objection handling and some scripted responses that you can use to help them understand. We did talk about a little bit today, but we're going to go into much more detail on the 29th. All right, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with me today. Absolutely appreciate it. My contact information is there on the screen, LinkedIn. Never hesitate to reach out, whatever we can do to help. All right, take care everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week.